Hello, it's 1:00, a little after. I'm here today with Anthony Meisner from Land Title in Boulder. So we're going to talk today more about the Boulder County market, but I'm going to try and pick his brain a little bit about Weld County too, since that's where I am, and I have a number of listings here. Before we start, Anthony, and before you dive into your data and stats, I wanted to talk about Denver. So I actually posted this morning on my business Facebook page an article from 5280 magazine about the most recent data that we saw in Denver, showing low inventory, which you can tell us what that translates to in your language. Low inventory, quick offers. Denver's showing 20 days to offer, which is actually 9 days less than last year. I think that's very interesting. So anyway, that article is on my Facebook page. If you're interested in the Denver stats, we're not going to really talk too much about those today. But Anthony's going to share, because we now have all of the numbers from April, and we have some of those beginning numbers from May when the market just opened up last week for us to do showings again. Anthony's going to share, because he is a numbers guy and he likes graphs and he dives into this data like way farther than I have the ability to understand. He's going to share those numbers, what he's seeing, maybe some predictions, and where we are today. Thanks.
Yeah,
Anthony.
interesting time to be in real estate for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is all your data, so I'm just really talking about what you're seeing and what we're seeing together here in the market. There's been some really interesting stuff here in the last let's just say couple months since COVID's been starting. Just kind of want to highlight some of the keys. I mean, we talked about just some of the interesting things that have been happening. We had the strongest first 10 weeks that we've had in a long time, probably because interest rates were pretty low and everyone was looking at just a bunch of low inventory levels, active market, lots of listings going on. It was just pretty crazy, right? And since can you guys all see this now?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So let's just kind of start at the top.
Wait, Anthony, we can see the whole slideshow. Do you want to make it a full screen? There you go. That's better. Perfect.
Better?
Yeah.
I guess from like a high level takeaway, if we look at Boulder County here, Boulder County has been wildly active, like we were talking about. And then the last 2 weeks of March, when we ended up going under some restrictions for COVID, and into April, obviously slowed things down quite a bit, but things haven't been as bad as some might expect, right? People are saying that the real estate market has completely come to a halt and all these really awful negative things. And the reality is, 47.7% less under contracts in Boulder County than usual. That's not a great sign, but it's also, that was with no showings for most of April, right? I mean, you weren't even allowed to go show a property or go look at a house. And I mean, even if it was vacant, you couldn't go. So I think from a high level, that's not the worst thing in the world. The fact that things were still able to move, people were still able to, get into a home if they absolutely had to, that's a pretty positive sign. The one thing that a lot of people look at this graph and panic about is the fact that it shows average home sales dropped by like a certain percentage, 17% or something like that. We've got a couple of slides later we can show that the luxury market is really what just came to a screeching halt. People kind of just pushed the pause button in luxury, and that's what made that kind of big swing as far as the entire market's concerned.
And luxury is a big market in Boulder County.
Yeah, it's a really big market. I mean, those numbers over 2 million, it's quite a bit of sales every month. So that changes a lot of stuff. If you look here, this one is month supply of inventory, and all this really means for a consumer is how competitive is the market, how much inventory is on the market. If you're a seller, this is an excellent time to sell. We're looking at 1.8 months of inventory on the market. What that really means for a seller is that it's a seller's market. This is a great time to sell a home. You're going to get, multiple offers probably, or at least have, depending on your price point, have a pretty good opportunity of selling it within the first month in many cases. 1.8 months of inventory means, if nothing changes between now in new inventory and in 1.8 months. All of the inventory on the entire market would sell. So that's like kind of what that metric represents. It's obviously very different based off the cities, and you can kind of see some of that down at the bottom there. But basically, you don't really hit a balanced market till 4 to 6 months. So as you can usually see, we're kind of trekking along a little bit higher than this. But with everything in consideration, there's not a lot of supply in the market, but there's still a ton of demand. So that would.
So I think this is like a common urban myth that's going around, and really every county that I work in is that, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a great time to buy a house. I'm going to get such a great deal. I think people have this in their mind that it is suddenly a buyer's market. And that's just simply not the case.
It's simply not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we're moving farther and farther away from a buyer's market. If you look at this next slide, this really tells us about buyer demand. And what that really means is how many people are out there shopping for homes relative to all those listings that are sitting there. And the number of days on market is going less and less. And as that gets reduced, you really have to be more and more competitive when you make offers out there. This is an excellent time to sell a home. This is a competitive time to buy a home. Right. I mean, if you want to look at it from the 30,000 foot view, we haven't been at these levels since 2018, right? Last year had a little bit higher interest rates. There's a lot of things going on. You have a lot of buying power right now, but you do have to compete. So when you go out there and you want to make an offer, you do have to make a competitive one for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I have a number of first-time home buyers right now, which I love, and I love counseling them on, we can't even look at a house without being pre-qualified right now. I know in a normal market, I counsel people not to do that, but right now we cannot. They won't even really let us in, and which is great because it means we know exactly what we can afford and we are ready to write an offer the minute we walk in the door.
Yeah, it's fantastic from that perspective. If you want to look at it from a perspective of price points, when I was talking about luxury a little bit ago, you can see that the red bars over on the right are sold. So that's 2 million to 3 million. There's been one sale, and in the last month in April. So that is not normal for this market. Mm-hmm. If you look at year to date, we've had 6 over 3 million sell. Previous year to date, we had 12 over 3 million sell. I would say the previous year is much more normal for the Boulder County market. So that high-end luxury has really come to a screeching halt. And I don't think it's going to stay there. I just think it's a kind of a temporary pause. When you're spending that kind of money in a house, people have different decision-making than they would in, let's call it the median home values in Boulder County. If you look at the median home values, though, let's call it under 800,000, the majority of the inventory is selling every month that's coming on the market. So that really tells us that it's very competitive. You really have to go out there, write strong offers. If you're listing a home, price it right, price it appropriately, and it is going to sell right now.
Mm-hmm. That's so encouraging.
Yeah, it's really good data. This one is the one that I would be most concerned about. Look how low the inventory levels are, under 800,000 right now. 1.5 months, 1 month, right? I mean, those levels are too low. They're not even high enough to kind of keep real estate moving forward. So if you have listings in those price points, I mean, if you have a house that you want to put on the market in that price point, this is a really, really good time to do that because it's going to sell very quickly. That 3 months of inventory level at like under 1.5 million, that's also like still a seller's market, right? The good news is there's a lot of room right now here for trade up buyers and trade up sellers. So if you're selling a house that's, let's say it's 500,000 and you want to move into 800,000, you might actually find quite a bit of inventory on the market, and you might find that your house sells really quickly. So if you're in that position, or if you're in a $1.5 million house and you want to trade up to a $2.5 million house, this could also be a really good time to do that.
Another way I've been trained to look at these numbers, which I think is helpful for buyers and sellers, is so looking at, let's say the 800 to 999 number is 2.79. Another translation would be there's 2.79 houses per buyer to look at. So in the 3 million plus, is that a 16 or a 14? 16. So
Yeah.
That's a lot more to choose from, which is what makes it more of a buyer's inventory, a buyer's market.
Yeah, that's a fair way to look at it. 16 months of inventory, and you see this in the high-end luxury all the time. If property comes on and it's just the cream of the crop, a lot of times they sell within, a day or a month of being on the market, because people that are in that price point are kind of waiting for that property that's perfect to come around. I mean, if you're going to spend 3 million or 5 million or 8 million on a property, it should be exactly what you want in many cases. So, some properties tend to sit a lot longer than others. And, we see that all over the place in Boulder County.
Let's talk about days on market. Did we talk about that one?
Oh, perfect. Let's go back to that. So days on market, this is another one just to show, this is like the buyer demand side of the equation, right? Month supply of inventory really measures the supply side. This is kind of basic economics 101, right? If you're looking at the demand, you have to think that this is, when you look at average days on market, that is really truly from the day it's listed, the day it goes on the market, all the way till the time it's sold. That's what's being portrayed from this data. So you have to think a lot of times 30 days of that is the period when it's under contract and you're just doing your due diligence. So, I mean, let's just take that 4 to 499 or that 6 to 799 range. You got 2 weeks worth of time where a house may actually be on the market. If you're looking at kind of an average home, there's just not a lot to look at right now. There's a lot of demand in those price points. And the average consumer, that is the median home prices in Boulder, that 300 to 800, whether it's attached or detached. So that's kind of, right in the middle of what everyone is purchasing. And that's the bulk of the market for sure.
Anthony, did you see an increase in the back on market and contracts falling through in April in Boulder County because people couldn't look at a house unless they were under contract? Or do you not have that data yet?
We don't really measure that data because there was a lot of people that would put something under contract, go look at it. It's a little more difficult to tell that because I don't think people were pulling them off the MLS when they were under contract for a day. I don't think
you're right.
They definitely weren't getting sent to us, the title company. People, expanded some of those deadlines. I don't know if we'll ever really know what that looks like, because if you look at I put a couple of slides in here. I'll swing over to this one on showing traffic. Oops, did I not put this in there? I've got a slide we can share on showing traffic. This is our showing traffic for Boulder County. So if you look, pretty much the entire month of April, or, let's call it 3 weeks of April, see all those numbers down there that are, single digits, basically. They were asking people to report virtual showings, but during that entire period of time, people were putting things under contract to go look at them, essentially. So we would have agents write 6 offers in the course of a weekend to go see properties, and it was kind of a headache, but they were asking people to report things. And of course, when Showing Time or other agencies that are third party are asking for something, it's more of a favor that you report something than it is like a necessity, right? You didn't have to call to set up a showing. Now you're communicating directly with agents. And that was the time where, we were operating at half capacity because it was just much harder to look at property. And you can see that large spike, that would be last Saturday. That was the largest amount of showings for the entire year at 640 showings for one day. So the real estate market is definitely back on track. I mean, we're starting to head that direction for sure. Those showing numbers are about 80% of where we were a year ago.
And that's not specific to Boulder. I mean, that record showings over this past weekend, record, in some cases, record ever, not just record for the year, but like record showing day number ever, happened in the last week in every county in the area. So that's just really interesting and encouraging. And it makes sense because the reason people move is not tied to this pandemic. They're having babies, they're getting married, they're downsizing, they're upsizing. Those reasons didn't go away. They just waited a few weeks.
Well, and I think in a lot of cases, all of us has been spending, the last couple months at home. A lot of people are realizing that their house isn't what they really want. Their house is too small. Their kids don't have enough space. The yard's too small, whatever it is, right? I mean, we all have our reasons why we'd want to move, but I've probably pulled up and looked at more property during this time than I ever have. And that's just, I know where I want to be. Like, I'm okay with my house, but it sure feels a lot smaller than usual when you're at home. Or, really wish we would have remodeled whatever sooner.
Yeah, should we just move? Let's just move. I have 2 brand new first-time home buyers who want to move, who weren't intending to move prior to the pandemic, but they are renting, and they just had both of them separately had a revelation of like, gosh, we know we want to own a home. What are we waiting for? So it really pushed them into that decision. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that. That's fantastic. I think that's a great thing. The best thing I ever did was buy a house. Absolutely.
Totally agree.
Getting married or having children, right? But all life-changing events. The house is definitely up there with some of the other major things you do in your life.
Well, your marriage and your children are better because you bought a house.
They are definitely happier, I'll tell you that.
Yep. So what else you got for us in there? Anything else you want to share?
We could talk about this one real quick. This is a good one for people to look at, mainly because I think it's pretty easy to digest. We talked a little bit about how the beginning of the year was doing so well. Interest rates were in a good spot. You have a lot of buyer demand. Things are finally coming through. And then COVID hits and you see this huge dip in what's going on, right? This is seller activity. I would expect really to see this into May, but there's so much demand right now that with the under contracts coming in this month, we're really going to have a very strong summer buying season. I mean, you can kind of see how it usually takes place. Like the most of the solds will come in May, June, and July. I really just think that this curve is going to be shifted a little bit, and we're going to see a very strong summer and fall market. This is a good one to kind of just take in some of the fundamentals and the basics of like what's going on in the county level. But yeah, I mean, that's about what I've got as far as graphs and charts. What other things are you seeing out there you want to talk about?
How do you think Weld County is doing? What are you seeing in Weld County? Same?
Weld County?
Different?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I've actually got a stat for you. We can show it.
Okay.
Putting
I asked
together
because a lot of my clients are in Weld County. So I know they would be interested in that number or those numbers.
Yeah, Weld County, I think a lot of the counties are very similar. Here's a good one. This comes straight out of the Colorado Association of Realtors. Let me find this again. I'll share this one.
Okay. And then I just also think it's going to be interesting. So the whole concept of days on market, I think, is going to, for a period of time, have less significance, especially for those houses that were on the market last month. It's almost like it doesn't count, right? Like when we report our days on market next month, they're going to be high. If a house was on the market during the time we couldn't show, I think that'll be just an interesting thing to see. Oh, you're sharing. Let me get that.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, can you see this okay?
It's loading. Oh, yeah, we got it.
So here's kind of the basics as far as Weld County from the county level, right? This is what the Colorado Association of Realtors puts out every month. We use this for our podcast to just kind of look at the entire Front Range. If you haven't ever tuned into the podcast, it's Front Range Facts. You can get it pretty much anywhere, frontrangefacts.com. It's a nice way to kind of look at what is going on in Colorado on the Front Range as a whole. And we kind of take a look at, all the different counties everywhere from pretty much Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. And the nice thing is CAR really represents this in a couple ways. You have single family and townhouse condos separated, so we can see how strong the market is up there. And you look at some of these numbers, let's call it April specifically versus April of a year ago. And, you have 24, 25% less listings on the market. I mean, it's a much tighter market than it was, but you only are down 25% in solds too. So it's not like it has been in the Boulder County market, right? Boulder County tightened up a lot faster, but it's probably due to price point.
Yes.
So when you think about it, look at the median sales price in Weld County. You're at $385. Median sales price of detached single family homes in the city of Boulder is, 1.2 million or something crazy. So, it's a tough comparison. But even if you look at the average sales price, Weld County's been booming over the last over the last year. I mean, you look at just year-to-date changes, you're up 6% in average sales prices. So there's some good information coming out of Weld. It's a pretty promising market. I think the only thing that's really going to affect Weld worse than everything else is this crazy oil crisis that's on our hands on top of it, which is completely unrelated to COVID and would have affected the market anyway. So it's definitely dealing with its own set of problems, considering Weld County produces, like 90-something% of all of Colorado's oil production. It's definitely a big part of the Weld County economy.
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's a huge, huge part of our economy. We are almost out of time. So here's my takeaways for my buyers and sellers. It's a great time to sell your house. It's a good time to buy as long as you have a great real estate agent and you can write a good offer. Not a time for lowball offers. What else? Am I missing anything?
No, I think as long as you're in a reasonable price point, and you're in some of the, I would say, middle of the road prices, that could be, all the way up to downsizing to first-time home buyers. This is a great time to get out and be active in the real estate market. I think if you can still get in this window during COVID and you're a first-time home buyer, it might make you a little bit more competitive than it has in the past, even though it's a very competitive market. It's going to be more competitive if all the restrictions are completely removed. So from a first-time home buyer perspective, get out and shop sooner than later. If you've got those under $800,000 listings or houses you want to put on the market, I would definitely do that sooner than later as well. But, I think very strong end to the year. I would expect this to be a little bit of a blip on the radar as far as the real estate world's concerned. This is still a great time to buy real estate and sell real estate.
Yep, I agree. So let's check in next month and see how your predictions hold up.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Right. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.